Want to feel the horror? Join our channel for more.
I'm just an average teenage girl. My life was pretty simple, just school, hanging out with friends, and spending time with my family. But there was one thing about my life that was anything but ordinary. The voices. Ever since I can remember, I've been haunted by these cries. They're like a never-ending echo of sorrow ringing out through the stillness of the night. At first, I thought it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, maybe a result of watching too many horror movies or hearing spooky stories around campfires. But as time went on, those cries grew louder, more insistent. Each night, I'd lie in bed, tears streaming down my face, my heart racing in my chest. I'd search my room, my entire house, and the surroundings outside, but I could never pinpoint where those sorrowful cries were coming from. It felt like they were coming from everywhere and nowhere all at once, a chilling whisper in the darkness. It was one of those nights when an unsettling feeling crept into me, more intense than any other night. Rain was pouring outside, and inside my heart was pounding with unease. Yes, it was those eerie cries that had turned my life into a never-ending nightmare. These cries were my secret burden, something I couldn't share with anyone in the world. I had to bear it all on my own. That night, the cries grew even stronger, as if the source of the torment was right beside me. I felt paralyzed, unable to move or even catch my breath. I just lay there praying for it to go away. But to my great misfortune, there were no answers, only the relentless cries. And then, all of a sudden, they stopped. It was as if a heavy curtain had been lifted, and I could only hear the gentle hum of the rain outside. I thought it was finally gone, and I dared to open my eyes. But what I saw was a sight that sent shivers down my spine. Right in front of me, there stood a ghostly figure of a woman. Her eyes were empty, hollow like an abyss. Where her legs should have been, there was nothing but emptiness. And in a haunting, whispery voice she said, "Find my legs." The fear was unbearable. I screamed as if my life depended on it, and it was my parents who rushed to my rescue. They tried to console me, to assure me that everything would be okay, but I couldn't escape the figure's gaze from the corner of my room. It felt as if it was still there, watching, waiting. So now I find myself here, sharing my experience with you. It's an experience that continues to haunt me every single moment of my life. Yet I've learned to choose to ignore it, to push it to the back of my mind, and to go on with my life. The cries may still whisper in the background, but I've made a choice to live in spite of the eerie figure and her haunting plea.
A few years back, I was still rocking my old flip phone. It was a simple device, and I didn't mind. Then one day, out of the blue, I received a random call. The person on the other end was asking for a girl named Sarah. I tried to explain that they had the wrong number, but they abruptly hung up. I didn't think much of it at the time, but that was just the beginning. Over the next few months, I started getting these calls asking for Sarah. It was like clockwork, happening once or twice a week, each time from a different number and a different sounding person. And sometimes, these calls would come at the most bizarre hours, like 3 a.m. It was seriously messing with my sleep. One day, I received another one of those calls. As usual, I told them I didn't know who Sarah was. After they hung up, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I went into my call history and hit the redial button, wanting to get to the bottom of this. But to my surprise, the answering machine told me that the number did not exist. I was puzzled. So I went through my call history again and tried calling some of the other numbers that had called me. The result was the same. The automated voice said the number didn't exist. It was like the calls were vanishing into thin air. I decided to do some detective work and Googled the numbers. However, all I could find was that these calls were coming from various places in the Midwest, like North Dakota and Montana. It didn't give me any solid answers. The next time I got a call asking for Sarah, I said, "Oh yeah, she is right here," and the other person on the other end said, "No, she isn't," and hung up. The situation got even stranger when I started receiving calls from unknown numbers. Whenever I answered, there was silence on the other end, and the caller would hang up. It was getting under my skin. One time, things took a particularly eerie turn. When I answered a call and said, "Hello," the person on the other end didn't hang up. I could tell someone was there, just listening, but they didn't say a word. It was incredibly unsettling. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about all these calls. Who were these people, and why were they so insistent on reaching Sarah? I had no answers, only a growing sense of unease that lingered with me. My parents once shared a rather unsettling incident from my childhood, though I don't remember it now. You see, when I was about 4 years old, I had this peculiar habit of talking to a man I saw in the mirror. It was one of those quirky things kids do, or so my parents thought at first. Naturally, my parents were curious about my behavior. They started asking me questions about this mysterious man in the mirror. It was as if I had a secret friend that only I could see. I told them all sorts of details about this man, how he looked, what he liked to do, and even how he had died. It was bizarre because I claimed that the man from the mirror had told me all these things. As it turned out, this story was more than just a child's wild imagination. My parents did some digging and found out that one of the former owners of our house had indeed committed suicide inside the very walls we were living in. Even more chilling was that the description I had given of the man in the mirror matched this previous owner. It sent shivers down my parents' spines, and understandably so. The thought that I was chatting with the spirit of someone who had met such a tragic end was deeply unsettling. In the end, my parents decided to move out of that house about a month after discovering this chilling connection. They just couldn't shake the feeling that something about that place was not quite right. It was a decision they made to ensure our family's peace of mind. Even if I had no recollection of the eerie friend I once had in the